Live from Ogasawara, this is the Monster Island Film Vault, episode 28, Nick Hayden versus the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. Hello, kaiju lovers, and welcome to the Monster Island Film Vault, a podcast seeking entertainment and enlightenment through tokusatsu. I am your host, the curator of this wondrous film vault, Nathan Marchand, and returning to the island, his third trip here, is one of my favorite people, and I hope one of your favorite people too, Nick Hayden.
Hello, I'm also one of my favorite people.
Well, I would hope so.
Most days.
Most days?
Most days.
All that really matters is that the rest, you're one of the favorite people for everyone else in the family, right? You know,
oh, sure. I'm the golden child. I'm the oldest, so I was always called the golden child.
Oh, well, no, I was thinking about your kids.
Oh, well, it depends on the day.
Your kids may not necessarily be a huge fan of Dad.
Do your dishes. Oh, I love you, Dad. That works great. Time to clean your room. Oh, you're such a good dad. Yeah, it works very well.
It's a little easier with the wife, right?
Yeah.
One of these days, I need to actually drag you, or not me, I should say. You need to drag Natasha out on your next trip onto the island or something.
Yeah, I just might call me out. I'm just dragging her out. I might have to convince her to come of her own free will.
That usually works better.
Yeah, I think it does normally. Yeah, like, Natasha, let's go to ice cream. Oh, wait, we're going to go watch a movie. At Nathan's house.
Yeah.
Involving a kaiju.
Yeah. So, a transatlantic trip to Monster Island.
Yeah, it works. You would never know the way you're going to get here.
Yeah. Speaking of which, how did Jimmy get you here this week?
Well, so I was given a small grant from, I'm teaching now, to do some research up north. And I was hanging out, and there was avalanche problem thing. And when I woke up, I was here.
Really?
Yeah. Jimmy brought me up. I don't know. I guess he was doing some sort of looking for old skeletons and stuff that he could maybe clone or do something weird with.
You're into cloning now? Oh, okay. That makes sense. You're an engineer, not a geneticist. So you were gathering bones for the scientists here. Okay, that makes a little bit more sense. Plus, you do remember what happened at our competition, right? We don't need that again.
I did not hear about that one.
You've never heard of Jurassic Park?
That competition.
That competition.
I thought maybe he was just trying to, do some CRISPR gene editing to help the dinosaurs not feel as aggressive or something.
Oh, that might come in handy with the Rhedosaurus, that because we do have one Rhedosaurus here.
Isn't there only one?
There's only one right now.
The only.
Yes. Which is a great segue into what our topic is for today, which is
The Beast.
The Beast. From 20,000 Fathoms. You forgot the ending.
I did forget it. So that's the 50s trailer, everyone.
Yes, because we decided to watch the trailer and some of the other special features, because I have the Blu-ray copy of it. That is what I used to screen it for you today. Yes, we only have one. We've only been able to find one. I mean, there used to be two. There was one back in 1953, which was the subject of this movie, but that one's kind of dead. So it's a little hard to have that one around.
Well, again, cloning.
Yes.
So.
Oh, that's what you were doing, wasn't it, Jimmy? You can neither confirm nor deny that you were collecting Rhedosaurus bones to clone this thing. Right. You keep telling yourself that and everyone else.
He's just
while
lonely.
You're at it. Yes, he is lonely.
Jimmy or the dinosaur?
Both, probably. Shut up, Jimmy. Although we treat the one here very nice. We call him Red very affectionately. This is kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but you know how the one in the movie was carrying a very nasty disease?
Yes.
Yeah, we have to make the Red on the island wear a face mask because we don't need him spreading that to the rest of the kaiju. I mean, there's been a bit of a panic about whether or not he may have COVID. Like prehistoric COVID, which if something's prehistoric, it's automatically worse.
Yes. Very bad.
Than modern anything.
Oh, they might have well wiped them all out and not the asteroids.
You never know. Yeah. You never know. Well, I forgot to do it again. At least this time I don't have to worry about screwing that up again this season, because this is the last main discussion episode that we're having. Thank you, COVID, for delaying Godzilla vs. Kong. I don't care what Jimmy says. Anyway, I forgot to mention that the tail end of the season here is going to be part of a little series that I like to call Kaiju Kings, which is a nice catch-all to talk about Beast from 20,000 Fathoms because it's an important film in the genre and a handful of Toho classics that will be rounding out the season. Also, today's Toku Topics are going to be a brief history of nuclear tests, particularly up to the mid-50s when the movie was made, and a brief history of amusement parks. And now, back to the show. But before we get into all of that, I need to do the entertaining info dump, and then we will get into our film discussion, because contractual obligations and all that fun stuff, Jimmy takes such pride in writing these things. Yes, I'm getting to it. Shut up. All right. You can't nail me on a contract violation. I'm going to make sure you never can. So let's get that out of the way through the magic of podcasting, and then we'll dive headlong into our film discussion. The Rhedosaurus is a ferocious and aggressive ancient dinosaur awakened from a frozen slumber by an H-bomb test in the Arctic. He instinctively migrates down the North American coastline to New York because it was his habitat millions of years ago. Presumably, he attacks anything in his way to defend himself or his territory or to get food. Professor Tom Nesbitt is an intelligent and open-minded scientist who first sees the Rhedosaurus when the beast emerges from the ice, but everyone believes he was hallucinating. He strives to prove what he saw was real, and after the beast's existence is confirmed, he works with the military to find a way to kill the creature. Lee Hunter is the smart and assertive assistant to Dr. Thurgood Elson, who helps him and Nesbitt with their research on the monster, often providing insights they don't see, while also flirting with Nesbitt. The brilliant yet skeptical Dr. Elson does become Nesbitt's ally, but not until he and Hunter are able to gather more evidence proving the beast is real, after which he advocates that the dinosaur be studied and not killed. The human and kaiju plotlines are unified aside from a minor romantic subplot. The characters' actions and decisions are connected to the Rhedosaurus in one way or another, whether that be investigating, pursuing, or attacking the creature. The Rhedosaurus is definitely the problem. Dr. Elson and a pilot descend into the ocean in a diving bell to locate the beast, but the submersible is swallowed by the dinosaur. The monster comes ashore in New York City and is attacked by police with pistols and rifles, but bullets have no effect and he eats or kills several officers. The army erects an electrified barricade to halt the creature and manages to wound his throat with a bazooka, driving it back into the sea, but many soldiers are infected with a prehistoric pathogen in its blood. The problem is solved using a combination of science and firepower. When the Rhedosaurus comes ashore in an amusement park, Nesbitt and sharpshooter Corporal Stone climb a roller coaster track and fire a nuclear isotope into the creature's wound. After several minutes of violent death throes, the monster dies. The witty screenplay by Fred Freiberger and Louis Morheim, with uncredited contributions from director Eugene Laurie and Robert Smith, is a simple and straightforward science fiction thriller with solid characters and a minor subplot. This was the first film whose special effects were directed and implemented exclusively by stop-motion master Ray Harryhausen, who created remarkable visuals despite the film's relatively low budget. The Rhedosaurus model's movements are fluid and lively, imbuing it with a surprising amount of personality. Its interaction with miniature buildings like the lighthouse are equally as astonishing. The integration of special effects and live-action footage is well executed using superimposition and clever editing. The Arctic sets give a tremendous sense of cold, and the urban sets blend with the special effects almost seamlessly. The film is one of Harryhausen's first great achievements. This is a light film with a few scary moments, but it does have a moderate amount of gravity. With characters attempting to ground the fantastical elements in science, this is more of a science fiction film than a fantasy film. While it technically isn't the first giant monster film, that honor belongs to King Kong, it is experimental in that it was the first atomic monster movie, creating many of the tropes that would be seen in the genre. To that end, this film established a style for the entire kaiju genre, taking what had been done in 1933's King Kong and modernizing it. Many atomic monster movies would follow in the United States and beyond for many years, most notably Toho's Godzilla in 1954. The film was greenlit after the success of a re-release of King Kong in 1952 to cash in on the renewed interest in monster movies. When it was learned that Ray Bradbury had published a short story later retitled The Foghorn that was similar to their film, the producers bought the screen rights to the story for $2,000 and used the popular author's name in promotions to increase its appeal. The film was meant to entertain a general audience. When released June 13, 1953 by Warner Brothers, who acquired the independent film for $800,000, it grossed $5 million on a $200,000 budget. These would be $7.8 million, $48 million, and $1.95 million, respectively, in 2020. It was booked to 1,422 theaters in less than 2 months and was one of the highest-grossing films of 1953. While critics were initially lukewarm on it, it has a 95% rating on Rotten Tomatoes and was one of AFI's top 100 science fiction films. Although it has a 6.7 with 6,850 ratings on IMDb, it is beloved by Monster and Harryhausen fans and ranks as one of the most influential genre films ever produced. A few forces are at play in the film. Nesbitt faces opposition from both psychologists and scientists, who write off his story of a giant dinosaur as preposterous. His friends in the military do the same. Nature clashes with civilization as the Rhedosaurus lashes out at a modern world he no longer recognizes. This is also seen as military might and technology find themselves outmatched by the creature. To Nesbitt's surprise, Hunter has managed to make her way in the male-dominated paleontology field. Elson advocates that the Rhedosaurus be studied for scientific advancement while the military seeks to kill it to protect human life. While it doesn't meditate heavily on them, the film does explore several themes. Nesbitt argues that science has limitations and that something can, quote-unquote, simply be, as in true, even if science hasn't observed it. Hunter's ambition and position in a male-dominated field is looked upon favorably. The protagonists pursue truth with fervor. Through ingenuity, the protagonists defeat the monster with science and the military working in tandem. Ironically, radiation both revives and kills the Rhedosaurus, illustrating the more positive American attitude toward nuclear energy. All right, kaiju lovers, with the season's final entertaining info dump finished, it's time for Toku Talk. All right, with that out of the way now, Nick.
Yes.
Fresh out of the screening room. This is your first time seeing this movie.
It is my first time seeing this.
Opening thoughts.
Opening thoughts. I think, well, it was interesting as we were watching it. I was asking some questions about timelines. And this was one of the early American kaiju films. Mm-hmm. And which makes sense because it has a general structure, but there's not a lot of flair necessarily. I mean, it's well done, but it's just sort of like, oh, monster. Oh, we'll talk about him, make sure he's real. Oh, let's kill him. The end.
I mean, there's a little bit more going on there. There is some conflict. We do have one scientist.
We have one scientist.
Dr. Elson, who says, no, we shouldn't kill this thing. It's the scientific find of the century, which I say as soon as we actually confirm that it's real, because before that, I deny its existence. Also, I'm 2 days away from retirement. I mean, I'm taking my first vacation in 30 years. I'm totally going to survive this movie. I'm jumping ahead a little bit.
So he does not quite survive. No, anyways, it's an entertaining movie, but you can tell that it's more of it's an earlier version because, you know, it's kind of setting up the style of some of these future movies without necessarily playing with it at this point. Mm-hmm. But like the model does a very good job, I think. And like you said, we were talking about the Arctic set is cold.
Yes.
And again, like, it's a good movie.
Yeah, so. I'm glad to hear. The big reason I wanted to have you on for this is because this is suggested.
Suggested by.
That is what it actually says in the credits. Suggested by. I'm like, Well, it's still got more of the source material in it than the iRobot movie with Will Smith, so...
By Ray Bradbury.
Yes. A story by Ray Bradbury, who's one of your favorite authors.
Yes.
So I just said, you know what? I have to have Nick. And I will tell you right now, listeners, kaiju lovers, this is based on a story called The Foghorn.
Read it.
Yeah. It was originally called, interestingly, Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. You heard all about this in the entertaining info dump, so I won't rehash it here. But y'all need some more Bradbury in your life. I'm just saying. Speaking as a writer and a lit nerd, yes, I nerd other things besides kaiju. You need some Bradbury in your life.
I convinced my sister to read Bradbury. Now she's in love with him because how can you not be?
Yeah,
he's great. I had my 8th grade class read There Will Come Soft Rains.
Oh,
which is a great story.
Absolutely. Honestly, probably one of the most brilliant short stories ever written. I'm not going to get too much on a tangent. We could probably go on a whole tangent about Bradbury.
Yep.
But all you need to know, listeners, is that There Will Come Soft Rains has no characters. It is nothing but setting. And it is one of the most compelling short stories you'll ever read. It takes a special literary genius to make something like that work.
So Bradbury's story is Foghorn. This foghorn in this lighthouse would cause...
I have my copy right here. It's from the Golden Apples... it's collected, I should say, in the Golden Apples of the Sun. It was originally published in the Saturday Evening Post.
Which is where they saw the picture that inspired the movie.
Yes. We watched the special features.
Yes. But anyways, the monster in that one attacks a lighthouse because it's trying to find its mate. Mm-hmm. Because he thinks the foghorn is the sound of its mate.
Yeah, the two characters that we have in that are a pair of lighthouse keepers, one of whom comes across as being like a grizzled old guy, and then the other one is this young whippersnapper. He's just like, I'm here because I want to learn how to be a lighthouse keeper.
The guy's like, you'll never believe it, I've seen this monster.
Yes. It was hiding in the ocean for millions of years, and then it heard the foghorn and thought, that must be one of my kind, and I'm lonely, and I'm going to go find it. And then it actually does. You know, the young guy's kind of like, oh, you're crazy, old man. You're crazy. And then he actually shows up and then destroys the lighthouse because it came all the way out there. It's like, you're not one of my kind. I am angry.
The anger of unrequited love.
Yes. That's the big takeaway.
Yes. And again, the movie does not have that theme of the anger of unrequited love. It just has the theme of monster woken up, trying to go back home, kills stuff.
Although you were kind of reading a little bit of the short story in there.
You could read
which I thought
story.
was really interesting, I thought.
But it is interesting. They do still have that whole, like, he's millions of years old. He's woken up because, in this case, of a nuclear bomb, which you told me was the first nuclear bomb in the movie like this.
This is the first atomic monster movie. So I would say, honestly, next to the original King Kong, which you saw
which is very, very
for
good.
The show, this has to be probably the most influential giant monster movie ever produced, right up there with the original Godzilla. So I would say it's King Kong, this movie, and the original Godzilla. They laid the groundwork for everything that came after it. And without Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, it's fathomable.
Dun-dun-dun.
Ha!
Good work.
That we may have not gotten Godzilla. And sometimes I wonder if maybe without this Bradbury story, possibly I think it's a little harder to argue because I've gotten some kind of conflicting stories about the timing of when the story was published and when the movie started production and whether or not they made the Bradbury would tell you that the movie was that somebody read his story and then started making the movie.
Yeah.
While other stories say that the story was out, but seemed like they were unaware of it. But then they're like, oh crap, he's a popular author, so we better buy the rights. And so we can ride Bradbury's coattails and stuff like that.
Well, and I wonder, it's possible that he had the idea of this monster and then saw the lighthouse photo that Ray Harryhausen claims was the inspiration, and then just added that into the mix of ideas too. I mean, who knows how the sausage gets made? Yeah, pretty much. But I feel like since we're already talking about the story, I did want to read an excerpt from it. We've got to get some is it too much to call Bradbury high literature? Probably a little. Depends who you talk to. Yeah.
Hashtag too soon. When did you become a literary critic? I've studied that more than you did in school. Just saying.
Jimmy's a man of many talents.
Apparently.
Or assumed talents.
Yeah. It's got more tall tales than, I don't know, Cup from from the Transformers movie. He's always telling wild war stories. I'm telling you. But anyway, I felt like I would read a little excerpt here, a paragraph that goes into detail about the monster, because I'm not 100% sure the illustration from the Saturday Evening Post and in the movie is exactly what Bradbury had in mind, but I'll read it and you can let me know.
Audience.
Yeah, you can let me know, Nick. And listeners, if you want to send in feedback about this, please do. We love hearing from our listeners. It's one of the best parts of the show. So anyway, here's the foghorn. It was a cold night, as I have said. The high tower was cold, the light coming and going, and the foghorn calling and calling through the raveling mist. We couldn't see far, and you couldn't see plain, but there was the deep sea moving on its way about the night earth, flat and quiet, the color of gray mud, and here were the two of us alone in the high tower, and there, far out at first, was a ripple, followed by a wave, a rising, a bubble, a bit of froth, and then, from the surface of the cold sea came a head, a large head, dark-colored, with immense eyes, and then a neck, and then, not a body, but more neck and more. The head rose a full 40 feet above the water on a slender and beautiful dark neck. Only then did the body, like a little island of black coral and shells and crayfish, drip up from the subterranean. There was a flicker of tail. In all, from head to tip of tail, I estimated the monster at 90 or 100 feet.
Yeah, the long neck does not translate into the movie.
Not quite.
But I guess the movie one is actually probably more impressive. I don't know. Impressive is not the word I mean, but like overwhelming, menacing. Then a long neck
Monstrous.
one would be. Monstrous? That would work, yeah.
Yeah.
Bradbury gives me more of a sense like one of those pronosauruses with like the fins.
Plesiosaur.
Yes, exactly.
Like the Loch Ness Monster.
Yeah, exactly.
Which, believe it or not, it's real. But that's a story for another day.
Okay.
Zilla has met.
Met
Nessie.
interesting.
They had a bit of a thing.
Huh.
Yeah. That's, like I said, whole other story.
A whole other story.
Yeah.
So, movie-wise, we start in the Arctic, and they're doing the science, and we have a narrator for a little bit for no good reason.
Oh, my gosh. That narrator is there for 5 minutes, and then he goes away, and both of us just thinking, could we have done this without the narrator? I think
so.
We could have done this without the narrator, but we needed all of those important details about Operation Experiment.
Operation Experiment.
Yes.
Government
which apparently is kept top secret by having the most generic sounding name ever.
Like Operation Experiment, not worth looking into.
Well, what's that one about? Oh, nothing important. Just bomb testing in the Arctic.
We'll go back. Oh, Project X. That sounds better.
Yes, we had Operation Experiment and X Day. X Day sounds a little more exciting.
Like that, yeah.
Yeah, X Day. That's when you celebrate that letter of the alphabet, the X-Men or Gilala, I guess. You know, the X from outer space.
All the above. It's like Life Day, but for mutants. I didn't say it was good, but it's kind of Life Day. It's canon now. I mean...
well, the Mandalorian.
Yeah, exactly. The Mandalorian celebrates it. Well, he doesn't celebrate it, but
just
anyways.
So you know, Jimmy, I'm getting you a Life Day card and probably a Life Day present. Hey, calm down. We can't. I got to keep these interruptions down a little bit, man. Okay, take your chill pill. Did you forget to take the Dramamine pills like Dr. Elson today in the movie? I'm just saying.
He's like, I won't get seasick. I'm too excited. I almost thought he'd take his pipe into the diving bell and be like, ooh.
Apparently the sailors have enough sense to tell him, yeah, you don't want
not in the diving
to smoke in an enclosed space.
So it's interesting, though. The nuclear bomb is actually super downplayed.
Yeah, which is interesting because I thought they could have brought it back, because the first time I saw this movie a few years ago, I thought, jumping ahead, we've already mentioned it a little bit in the opening, but they wound the Rhedosaurus, and it starts bleeding, and then they realize, oh my gosh, it's got 100 million year old disease in it, and this is not good. And I thought at first that what was actually happening was the thing's blood was radioactive, which actually would have made really interesting sense, but then it would have wrecked the ending because they kill it with a radioactive isotope.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit ironic now that I think about it, that it gets revived by a nuclear bomb and then they kill it with a radioactive isotope.
Well, because the bomb just melts the ice it's in. It doesn't have anything to do with the radiation. I mean, at this point, in this movie, nuclear bombs are still like the beginning of a new Genesis. I mean, that's like their phrase there. Like, it's a hopeful thing, as opposed to later movies you get this, or Godzilla in a couple of years, you get this sense that, no, this is the... And again, they're on the other side of the bomb.
Yeah.
So they have a different perspective.
That is a whole to-do, my friend.
Exactly.
But this does... I think it is worth noting, comparing this with Godzilla, the 1954 film, the marked cultural differences, and particularly the attitude toward the bombs.
Yeah.
Here, it's a little bit more cavalier.
Yeah.
I mean, they at least acknowledge the fact that there's danger involved with it.
They're like, but we'll figure it out in a couple of years.
Yeah, something like that. It's like, are we writing the first chapter of a new Genesis, or are we writing the last chapter of the last one? Stuff like that. So there's at least some lip service given to that, but it's still a very American, more or less positive attitude in one form or another toward the bomb and nuclear things. Progress. Whereas the Japanese do not share that sentiment.
No.
They do not.
And not that this movie's trying to make any... I don't think it's trying very hard to make any big point of that sort of stuff anyways.
No, but it is certainly tapping into, I would say, at least some nuclear fears that were going on at the time. I mean, this is the early days of the Cold War, so that there is that there. Because one of our Toku topics today is going to be discussing, briefly at the very least, the history of nuclear tests. And there were several major ones that happened before 1953, after the war and everything. So these would have been in the headlines at the time. It would have been something on people's minds.
Yeah.
So it was a topical thing to tap into at this time in history. So I'm not surprised that it's there, but it does seem... Unlike in Godzilla, it's really just a plot point. And it's only really at the beginning, and it never really comes back, whereas it is the focus in Godzilla.
It's in many ways seem like in this movie, the focus is, let's this monster run around, do things.
Yes.
Because obviously the nuclear bomb, atomic testing, you could have done more with, and like Godzilla does. You could have done a ton of stuff with this like ancient disease thing. I mean, that's very like War of the Worlds, but reverse.
Yeah,
which is kind of cool.
It's one of those things. It's an intriguing plot point that gets introduced within the last 10 minutes.
Yeah. It's like Act 3.
Yeah. And then all it really is just to amplify the threat of the monster at this point. So it's just okay.
And then when the monster dies, the end right away.
Yeah, it is one of the most abrupt endings I have ever seen in a movie. I mean, you literally get, 5 or 10 seconds of denouement? Yeah, we're throwing out some literary and writer terms here, but for those who don't know, that is the falling action. After you've had a climax, it's where everything just kind of calms down, and it's like these final moments where everything kind of gets wrapped up and the characters kind of get acclimated to their new normal and things like that.
Because as far as character development, there's really not much of anything outside of like, I used to be skeptic, now I'm not.
These are not entirely flat characters. They're not boring characters.
No, they're not. No, they're entertaining characters. They have some good lines. Some stuff.
That was something that we were remarking. Is just this film clearly comes from the old school way of writing screenplays. Which is make every single character, no matter how brief their appearance is in your script, you make them as interesting as possible.
Like the nurse.
The nurse who comes in and talks with Nesbitt, and I love their whole conversation because she just comes in and he says, well, what's going on in the world today? So he opens up the newspaper and she says, just more death and politics. And the only thing worth reading is the comic section. And I'm thinking, some things never change.
Exactly.
So, There's an interesting commentary
Yeah,
for
exactly.
you right there. People felt that way 60 years ago.
I've always felt that way.
It's going on 70 now, almost, now that I think about it.
Yeah.
67 years. This movie's 67 years old.
We didn't start the fire, but we tried to fight it.
Yeah, apparently. Oh, gee whiz, I thought the song references were done now that the Metters weren't here. Now you're just keeping it up. I love it.
Yes.
Anyway, so every single character is interesting. The dialogue is really witty, and
We got some blooming romance, sort of.
but
Scientists go on
not
dates.
really. Yeah, apparently they go to ballets.
Yeah, why not?
You know, because that's what
And-
scientists
and
do on
apparently
dates.
it's so-
And when they flirt, they talk about their respective fields and about how, like, I have to study the past, so you know how to study the future. You know, it's because
So here's a present.
fossils, the atom.
Yeah. The atoms didn't exist in the past, only in the future.
Apparently.
Yeah.
And then we weaponize them because that was a great idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Nothing gone wrong with that.
Don't send me angry letters. Really? You're going to send me an angry letter? I dare you. I dare you.
I can send you one too if you want.
Well, you know the email address. You've listened to the credits on the show.
Blah.
So there you go. So we have some stuff going on with the characters, and they're interesting.
They're likable.
They're likable. They're
Mhm.
interesting, but it's not really a character-driven story. And to be honest, with a lot of older science fiction stories, whether they be in print or film, you know, with a few exceptions, you know, I would say Jules Verne was a little bit more character-driven than, say, H.G. Wells.
Yeah.
But the characters are there to serve the plot,
And
to
this
serve the idea.
And the idea this time is dinosaur. I mean, really. And I think that's why it was so, I mean, from what I know, it was super popular.
Oh, it was one of the highest grossing films of 1953.
It's the Jaws of the 1950s, basically. Yeah, it's super popular, sets off a run of...
Yeah, because, I mean, yeah, you had them, beginning of the end, the giant Gila monster. I know not all of these are good, and some of them are on MST3K, but I don't care. You know, Godzilla, obviously, is the biggest thing to come out of it.
Well, and that's the thing, is that some of the follow-ups end up on MST3K are not great. Like, this is very well... I mean, it's I don't even want to say excellently well done, but it's very good. It's very enjoyable.
I wouldn't call this a B movie. I would say it is an A picture.
Yes.
Maybe low tier A picture. That might be a little bit mean. That just seems a little bit too mean to me, period. It's not a B movie.
No, it's very well done. And like in one of the things we watched, it was a very low budget movie for back then, even back then it sounded like.
Yeah.
And apparently
it was
like
an independent film as well, and then Warner Brothers picked it up and
so it's
made gobs of money off of it. And
yes.
Which honestly I think should tell you something, that one of the highest grossing movies of that year was technically an independent film that got bought by a major studio.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know they made some changes. The movie had a different score before it got bought, and then the score got replaced. And I will tell you, I think the score is appropriately bombastic.
Yes.
You know, the interesting thing, Harryhausen, who's a student of Willis O'Brien,
Mm-hmm.
you remember from King Kong.
Yes.
He wanted Max Steiner, who composed for King Kong, to work on this movie. And unfortunately, it didn't happen. And I'm thinking, how perfect would that have been? Although I will say, the score we did get is at times very King Kong-esque. It's big and it's bombastic.
Especially when he's attacking New York.
Yes. So it still works, but you were connecting. I'm going to go back to that a little bit, talk about you connecting the movie. You were joking while we were watching. It's like, it's the story with none of the substance.
Yeah.
You know, because that's what happens with a lot of these
movies.
literary adaptations when they get made into films.
Yes.
I have 3 exceptions to the book is always better rule. But then you actually started making connections, but it's more subtext than anything else. Now, we mentioned that the short story is about unrequited love.
Yeah, I mean,
it's loneliness.
Deep loneliness. I mean, the foghorn is representative of deep loneliness, and that loneliness doesn't really come through in the movie. You can read it on it if you want, but I don't think a normal person without the context of foghorn would.
Yeah, but the way you were connecting it while we were watching it is that the monster in the story attacks the lighthouse because it realizes the thing I've been following all this time is not one of my kind, and I am still alone, and he rages. And you were saying when the monster came ashore in New York is that they say all he's doing is coming back to what he thinks is his habitat, his home, I guess you could say it's like a salmon returning to where he was spawned. And then he gets there and suddenly it's this concrete jungle and it makes him angry.
Yeah, I was just thinking, if you saw it from his point of view, it's like Rip Van Winkle. He woke up after 10 million years like, what is all this stuff? And who are these worms walking around my land? And he starts eating them. Okay, thank you, Jimmy. I just threw out numbers there.
Oh, so what if he forgot a 0? The point was communicated.
He's old. Very old.
Yes. But I do think
it's not a day over 1 million, though.
Oh, yeah. I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
Although he comes across, since we're on the subject of the special effects and the monster, I really do feel like that thing is, I swear Harryhausen modeled him after an angry cat. Because that's the way he behaves.
He has some of those movements. His tail is very cat-like.
He's a little twitchy in the tail. He's like the first time that he starts getting shot at, his defense to that is he just turns around and just starts flicking the tail at him. It's like,
while we're talking about flicking the tail and stuff, we could call out the best minor character, which is that police officer.
The unnamed cop who has nerves of adamantium. He's so casual. He's not, everyone else is running and panicking, and he's just casually walking up between the cars, the monster smashing everything around him, and then he just gets out his gun. He's like he starts shooting at it, and he's like not a shred of fear. I mean, if he had managed to prove that it wasn't just his nerves made of adamantium, because the rest of him is not made of adamantium.
No, it got chopped pretty good.
I was joking that the cop says, "I've got guts." Well, he's like, "I have the guts to face you," and the monster says, "Yeah, I eat guts." And then he chomps on him.
He's just like, oh, it's a dinosaur. Time to shoot it. I mean, that's basically, he like doesn't have no expression. He's like, okay, let's do this thing. I think, in modern movie, we have like this 10-minute fight scene as like the cop is like Neo and the dinosaur and jumping around, but like not breaking a sweat, some anime sort of like Trigun sort of thing. Pacifist.
And then he gets eaten.
Yeah.
The movie will be twice as long. And I think I've actually seen this movie. It's called Godzilla 98. Here's a transition for you. I don't know if I've said this on this podcast. I know I've said it elsewhere. That movie has more in common with this than it does anything Godzilla. And to be honest, with a few minor changes to that script, it could have just been a bad 90s remake of The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. In fact, I made a list of the things that movie parallels with this one. And I'll go over them for you really quick right here. And you can tell me if I'm crazy or not. You've seen Godzilla 98, right?
Yes.
I'm sure you probably blocked it from your memory like a lot
of I don't remember much of it anymore. I've seen it. Yep.
Yeah. Be a little nice to Dr. Totopoulos. He gets a little tired of people ragging on him about that here on the island. So if you go meet him in the common area or something, be nice.
All right.
Plus, getting a little tired of people saying, you look just like Matthew Broderick. And he's like, shut up. Anyway.
I thought it was like Inspector Gadget.
Yeah, well, yeah, that too.
Okay.
So, a survivor from the wreck boat is visited in a hospital by another character.
Yeah.
Except in this case, it's not Sean Renault, which is unfortunate. The monster takes New York City. That's probably the most obvious one.
Yeah.
Scientist, hero, and a love interest. Yeah. Although...
minor.
I will say Lee is infinitely better than Audrey.
Oh.
I don't know how Totopoulos and Audrey stayed together, I'm telling you. But monster comes ashore in a dock.
Yeah.
Except they don't have the old fisherman running away.
Yeah.
Monster picks up a car in his mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And the monster somehow is able to hide in the frickin' city.
Yep.
That is a frequent complaint about Godzilla 98. It's like, how the heck do they lose track of this thing? Well, guess what? The Rhedosaurus can hide too, but at least in Godzilla 98, they say, well, he burrows. This one is just like, he magically disappears. And we don't know where he is.
Reappears inside roller coasters.
Yes.
Somehow.
Yes. That was another thing. It's just like, how did he get into the loop for the roller coaster at the end? Because I didn't see any part where it was knocked over and where he probably plowed through.
He ducked down
very gently, and then he proceeds to start eating it.
Yes.
I was like, come on, dude. I would think after you eat about a third of the track, and you'd be like, oh, that's not delicious. Maybe this part will be delicious.
You need more fiber in his diet.
Still not delicious. What was your joke for that?
I only needed toothpicks originally, but maybe
No.
What,
And then actually you had since you're speaking as a dad, you've got 3 kids now, you made probably the best joke when I was saying, like, why is he eating that thing still when it's probably not, he just chomps on and spits it out, and you said...
Oh, he's teething, yes. Which, why not? Or maybe he needs more fiber in his diet.
That too. I don't know. I can tell you, to this day, Red is a little tired of the other kaiju asking him for wood when they play Settlers of Catan. I'm just saying. You know, he's like, really, guys? So the other Redosaurus ate a roller coaster. Get over it.
Not the weirdest thing ever eaten by a kaiju.
Probably not.
He's trying to cleanse that policeman out of his stomach.
Yeah, he's like, I need a toothpick. I got cops stuck in my teeth.
He was actually picking his teeth with a shotgun.
But while I'm thinking about it, since I just talked about the parallels with a terrible Godzilla movie, let's talk about the parallels with the good one.
Okay, yes.
And you've seen the original film.
It's been a while.
It's been a little while. But it is uncanny how many parallels there are between this Hollywood blockbuster and Godzilla. And this may not be all of them, but these are all the ones that I wrote down when I watched this movie in preparation for this broadcast. Nuclear Tests Awaken the Monster.
Yes.
Features an elderly scientist who thinks the monster should be studied and not killed.
Yes.
There is something of a romance. Now, it's more pronounced, actually, weirdly enough, in the Godzilla film. You have a series of attacks on boats.
Yes.
Monster rampages through a city. King Kong kind of set that up, but this really solidified the trope.
Yeah, because King Kong didn't go to a city. He got taken to a city.
Yes.
So.
Scientist dives underwater in a diving bell to find creature, which is in Godzilla, but in that case, it was just a scuba suit.
Yeah.
Also, in that movie, it was to destroy Godzilla, whereas in this, they're trying to find it.
Yeah.
And the scientist dies during the dive. And also, during this sequence, they spot the monster in a rocky area. And the scientist talks with a woman, and that happens in the Godzilla film as well. The context is very different.
Yeah.
And I mentioned before that the Redosaurus in this picks up a car.
Yeah.
Like in the 98 film. Well, in the case of Godzilla 54, it was a train, but it's still a very similar image, at least a related idea. But the thing that's really interesting, though, is we actually see casualties.
Yes.
That's a little bit surprising, considering this was probably made as essentially a blockbuster. But they actually show people getting hurt, dying, and we're not just the cop getting eaten, but people getting crushed under rubble.
They give us numbers.
And they give us numbers. It was like, what, 180 people
killed and
1,500 injured?
Yeah.
I mean, they're giving actual numbers to this, which in this one is just to show, this monster is a threat, whereas in Godzilla, that was the whole thing.
Yeah.
The whole movie is based around that.
Yeah.
And then we have a hospital scene in the aftermath of it, where we're seeing one person is declared dead, we're seeing other people are hurt. So again, in this movie, to illustrate the level of how threatening the monster is, in Godzilla, it's the whole point.
Yes.
The military mobilizes to fight the monster, but he seems immune to bullets. Yes. To quote the Brigadier from Doctor Who, for once I wish we could fight an alien menace that wasn't immune to bullets.
So we got the cops coming out in this
which
movie.
is really interesting. Instead of the military being the first responders, it's actually the police. And honestly, which I actually think is more true to life, the police would be the real first responders. The military is not going to mobilize that quickly.
Especially back in the 50s.
Yeah. So kudos to them for actually thinking about that. And the monster attacks electrical wires.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in this film, it actually stops him.
Yeah.
In Godzilla, it didn't work.
This monster is far more destructible than Godzilla.
Which there are messages behind that. But the whole idea of the durable monster that's able to resist military weapons to an extent is definitely a trope of the genre.
Yes.
And we'll keep seeing it. Like I said, it's one of the things that gets solidified by Godzilla. And I mean, even in this, the military is not able to stop him. And technically, I guess you could say, actually, now that I think about it, it's not really a purely military solution. Just like in Godzilla films, it's never a purely military solution, other than Godzilla 98, that kills the monster. Now, they use a military sharpshooter, but it's Nesbitt, the nuclear physicist.
Nesbitt. I don't know about that name.
Tom Nesbitt, who was apparently played by a Swiss man, because I was trying to figure out his accent the whole time. I was like, what the heck accent is that? You sound a little weird, dude. He's the nuclear physicist, like I said, and then he says, we'll use a radioactive isotope, but I need someone to actually shoot it into the open wound. Are you a dead shot? Yes, sir. And then another one of the great lines in the whole movie said, you know how to use this? I pick my teeth with it. I'm like, oh my gosh.
There you go.
We got somebody who thinks he's as BA as Captain Gordon, our head of security here on the island. I mean, I'm pretty sure he uses a rifle as a toothpick. I mean, you should see what the man eats in the break room here on the island. He's a wee bit crazy. Anyway, so it's not a purely military solution, which is again, but that's a very Japanese thing. But in later American films, I do think you tend to see more of a military, so which again illustrates the differences between cultures.
Yes,
America
exactly.
being not militaristic, I would say, but certainly military positive.
Yeah,
I guess you could say.
And I think we, especially in our stories or movies, we like the sort of just like brute battle.
Yes,
and that's
it's
how
a very
we finish it
Western culture.
Yeah,
sort
we
of
don't tend to
thing, I would
talk
say.
our way out of things or find non-violent solutions to issues. At least in our stories.
Yes. I'm suddenly thinking of Independence Day, where it was a military solution, but hey, the aliens just started shooting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like they gave them much of a chance to talk. So like I said, there's so much about it, but Godzilla 54 goes in such a different direction.
Yes.
So it's like
It takes the skeleton and puts a whole different
the way
beast on it.
Yeah.
The beast.
The beast.
The beast.
From 20,000 Fathoms. Oh, don't spoil our fun. Anyway, the way I had explained it to you was that this is a blockbuster, but Godzilla 54 is an art house film.
Yeah.
It's so night and day.
Yeah.
With all this.
It really
Now,
is.
it would be a really interesting double feature to show both of those movies and then compare and contrast them afterward. I think that would be really interesting, but that's an adventure for another day.
Yes.
So we bring all of this up, but what's kind of interesting is how quickly I guess it makes sense, our very scientific characters try to write off this monster. When Nesbitt gets back to the States from the Arctic, and he says, I saw a monster. And they're like, and there has a psychologist who's sitting there who's like, you didn't see a monster. This was clearly a hallucination you had because you were under tremendous stress and your mind snapped for a few minutes and saw a monster. And so you're writing this off as a PTSD hallucination?
This is not the beast you're looking for.
Yeah, this is not the beast you're looking for.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad I could diffuse the PTSD joke of Nathan, which was very insensitive with the Star Wars.
Hey.
It was. Yeah, look, you don't have to like him, but you should treat him nice.
Hey, we may badger each other on the air, but Jimmy and I are actually really good
Or
friends.
like Shark and Octopus.
Yes, like in this movie.
Okay.
Which, oh my gosh, dude. Let's talk about that really quick, as it's in my notes.
Because it's kind of sidetracking the movie.
It is a little bit of a sidetrack in the movie. When Dr. Elson goes down, he's like, I'm seeing the sea life doing things, and we got a couple of the residents who are not getting along right now. And then it's a real shark and a real octopus fighting each other, and it would honestly be kind of bold and interesting if it wasn't so obviously in an aquarium, because the octopus actually grabs the glass at one point. It's like, really? But the thing that's most shocking is I'm pretty sure that those were both real animals, and they actually filmed the shark eating the octopus, and they put it in this movie. Don't tell PETA. I'm just saying. You know how they have to put a thing in the credits for movies now that says no animals were harmed in the making of this motion picture? They can't put it in this one.
Jimmy, do you have a time machine? Okay, good. I'm glad you don't have a time machine. I can see it being misused for people like PETA going back and trying to fix movies, and then has all kinds of problems.
Oh, man. Which kind of goes back to another Bradbury story.
It does. The Sound of Thunder.
Sound of Thunder. A butterfly effect.
In this case, it'd be like the sound of octopus is not dying.
The sound of PETA.
All right.
We are going to get letters.
But so they
if it's not PETA, it's going to be Scale. They're the kaiju right activists that we have to deal with on occasion here.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
That. So they wouldn't write off as like hallucination, which I guess is the only explanation if you don't believe them. But like 5 people are like, you're crazy. It's like, I'm not crazy. Like, yes, you are. Like, okay.
Well, the thing I'm thinking about is, okay, let's take what the psychologist says. You're in a harsh environment. You're under a lot of stress. Kind of life-threatening situation. You just saw one of your friends get hurt. You think and then he died. He's like, but he wasn't dead when I found him. And, and all of this stuff. I don't understand how someone in that situation would snap and imagine a dinosaur.
Yeah,
He's
I do it all the time.
A nuclear physicist. Why would he imagine a dinosaur? If he was a paleontologist, I might be willing to go with that.
Exactly.
But he's a nuclear physicist. So it already, in my opinion, just seems like a BS excuse to try to write it off.
Yeah.
Which I think is what the movie is trying to say. Yeah, this is a BS excuse that they're trying to write.
They're like, well, we don't know what you mean, but it can't be real, so mumbo jumbo.
Yeah, but then we get a scene later where Nesbitt goes to Elson and tells him the story, and Elson actually gives us some real science where he's saying there's no way that this can happen. It'd be 100 million years old.
You can't hibernate.
It can't hibernate for that long. It's like, but it could be like a bear. It's like, yeah, a bear can do that for one winter with all the food stored in it. It doesn't work here. And then Lee, we get introduced to Lee, our love interest. As much as I hear even some of my fellow podcasters kind of complain about how 50s sci-fi movies treat women, I feel like Lee is strangely progressive for 1953. She's very assertive. She's very driven. She's very smart. She's in a scientific field. And
she's not damsel in distress at any point.
Yeah, and Nesbitt even says, a girl in paleontology? And, so he kind of calls it out a little bit, and she acknowledges, there aren't very many women who do this.
And she basically said, I argue with my teacher all the time, then he hired me.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, so, like I said, weirdly progressive for 1953. I'm just saying. I'm just putting that out there. I'm talking to you, Travis, at Kaiju Weekly. I know you probably want to write me about this. I know you love Harryhausen. So send me some feedback. I'd love to talk to you about this issue.
But we had all these reasons why.
Well, anyway, so
mammoths, but they were dead.
She brings up mastodons. And he said, like, the meat was still good. It was frozen. And he said, but the difference is they weren't alive.
It was meat.
Yeah. So, and I think it's interesting. So they're actually paying lip service to the fact that, this is an insane concept that makes no sense scientifically. Apparently, they haven't spent enough time on Monster Island, let me tell you. They invented a whole other branch of science around here. They call it kaijuology.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just saying, we've learned a lot in 67 years. But all that being said, so they're bringing up all of these issues that there would be with this. And I think it's interesting that this script is smart enough to acknowledge that it's kind of a preposterous concept. Yeah. It's at least acknowledging it. But then our scientist characters go about things in a very scientific manner. They have to replicate results. They have to get the same descriptions and the same reports from different people at different times. And so everything coincides. And we have the funny scene of 2 scientists flirting, as I joked, where they're going over these different dinosaur illustrations, all from Charles R. Knight, which this needs to be mentioned. The illustrations that this man did have been tremendously influential. The popular image of dinosaurs he essentially created.
Okay.
They were the inspiration in King Kong, and they were inspirations for this movie and many, many more that came. Like I said, when someone says dinosaur to you, the image that comes into your head is probably something inspired by his work. Just so you know. Yeah. He's immensely popular with the scientists here on the island and our competition, apparently. Anyway, so they start going about things very scientifically. We even have a quick little trip to Canada. Shout out to Chris Cook, my listener in Canada. There's a little trip to Canada here. One of the boat captains is French Canadian.
Yep.
Chris is not French Canadian, but And then the other thing that was nuts is the captain's name is LeMay, and I'm like, oh my gosh,
you know LeMay?
I know a LeMay, John LeMay, the guy who wrote this book right here and many others. The Lost Films Mutated Edition. And I even texted him after I saw that. I was like, dude, the captain's name in this movie is LeMay. He's like, oh yeah, I thought that was the giant behemoth, but I guess it's that one. So,
Nice.
John's been on the show before.
Yep,
He's
yep.
wonderful. So that was really exciting. But then we get to this scene, and honestly, it might be, it's up there with probably one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie, where they've learned all of this stuff. They've brought back the sailor, another sailor who had survived. And what you said, he's like, he doesn't look trustworthy. He's like, he looks like a sailor.
He does. He just looks so out of it. He's just like, you can tell
he looks like a dude from the was it Deadliest Catch or whatever it's called. Probably a little hungover, but he was probably on sedatives for a while. Cut him some slack. All that being said, Nesbitt and Elson have this little exchange where he says, "Hey, if a piece of the sun," I'm paraphrasing, if a piece of the sun flew out onto Earth, I would want to study it and learn all the things about it. And Ellison says, yeah, but it would have been seen by 100 million people or something like that. And then Nesbitt replies by saying, because he's trying to compare this with the monster. Yeah. And Nesbitt replies by saying, wouldn't matter if 100 million people saw it or nobody saw it. It just is. Mm-hmm. It would still simply be, I think is how he put it. I just wanted to mic drop right there. I mean, that's so applicable to a lot of things. Yes. Science, religion, so many things. Yep. Both of us are good Christian people here. We would latch onto that and be like, see, we can argue for the existence of God. Yeah. Just because, if
it's true, it's true.
If it's true, it's true. That is what's wonderful about this.
It was a good argument.
Yeah, it was a tremendous one. Although then later on, Elson has another one of my favorite lines. It's along those same lines.
See, my podcast.
Jimmy's been very generous with the rim shots. I haven't gotten the sad trombone yet.
See, I have to do my own rim shot to my podcast.
It's because you wish you had my setup here on the island.
It's a very nice setup.
Yes. And they call up one of the military higher-ups who's friends with Nesbitt, and he's telling him, to keep an eye on things and all of that. He's like, really? You want me to keep an eye out for, a giant monster? And he starts rattling off these things like, what was it? Flying. One of them was flying saucers. Yeah. And I was like, that sounds like 2020. But, it was like monsters and flying saucers. Like, yeah, it sounds like 2020. But, and then Ellison says, how do you know flying saucers aren't real?
I know, that's a great line. It's just thrown away there. They keep moving.
Throws it in there. And I'm going to tell you right now, they are real. Jimmy has at least one in his garage.
No, I don't doubt it.
So,
and I need to see this garage this time.
It's from I think it's one from the Disco Space Nuns. So, we're a little careful with that one.
I need to take a tour of this garage. I didn't get to see it last time I was here. Okay, awesome. I'm so glad you'll take me. If I'm here, I might as well see the sights.
Yeah, definitely. So clearly we've had a little bit more to say about this movie than even I was necessarily expecting.
Yeah, because I think you can talk about it in lots of different ways because the way it relates to lots of other movies is important, even though from our 70 years in the future, it doesn't seem all that groundbreaking it really was.
Yeah, which I guess brings up the question. I'll throw this out. We're not a review show. We're a film appreciation, film discussion show. Do you think removing this film from its place in history, is this a good film on its own? I would say yes.
Yeah, I would say yes, too. I don't know if it's a great film on its own. I think it's a good film on its own.
Yeah, I would probably say this is a good film. I would say Godzilla, the original Godzilla, that's a great film.
Yes, I would say that. Again, there's a lot of good elements in this. It all fits together well. I think just because it doesn't have a deep second layer, I might not throw it into the great.
Probably not. I mean, I know you were calling it the Jaws of 1953.
Well, I was half joking
but I would say that there are more layers in Jaws.
Yes, I would agree.
Most certainly. I just want to say that. Remember how I said I had 3 exceptions to the book is always better? Jaws is one of them. So, fight me.
Spielberg's very good about layering emotion and plot and stuff.
Yeah.
And this movie, again, it's partly just the time period. It just doesn't have as much of the emotional level going on. Yeah. But, I mean, I think it's a good movie. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's like, some B-50s movie. I think it's a step above that, certainly.
Yeah.
If not a couple.
Well, and we've been talking about this movie's legacy a bit already, but there's some other ones I haven't mentioned yet, including one that is not only relevant to this podcast, is also relevant for you, Nick, which is Cloverfield.
Cloverfield.
This has a Cloverfield connection because there actually is a clip of this movie of the beast, the Rhedosaurus, that is put into Cloverfield.
Oh, I guess it's been a long time since
It's been a long time since I've seen Cloverfield.
I really enjoyed Cloverfield when I watched it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess it makes sense because all three of those monsters, and again, comes a lot, but they all come from the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
They all emerge from the deep.
Mm-hmm. Which is what that was the working title for the script, Monster from the Deep.
Yeah. And I get that. There's a nice sort of symbolism to the rising up out of the primordial chaos of the waters.
Mm-hmm. The sea is often used, particularly in ancient literature,
yes.
and even, relatively speaking, more recent literature.
Especially
I'm thinking of like Herman Melville and Moby Dick.
Yeah.
The sea is this pool of chaos, this unknown, and there are things that come out of it, and we don't know what it is.
Leviathans,
or it's this dangerous thing that has to be crossed and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, if you're speaking biblically, the turbulent sea is a manifestation of God's power, but it's also something that he has control over and he can calm it and things like that.
Yeah.
Or monsters come out of it.
Yeah. Or monsters come out, which, is a nice sort of modern take on the mythic idea of the sea.
Yeah. So it totally makes sense. Also, just to let you know, them and King Kong also have clips in Cloverfield as
Makes
well.
sense.
So it makes sense. And also, I mean, I know we've already said may not necessarily be a great movie, but apparently AFI would disagree.
And again,
AFI put it on their 100 greatest sci-fi films. Although, again, I think that might be more because of its place in history and a little bit less its own merits.
I mean, it certainly has its own merits, but its place in history, I think, would probably bump it into the top 100.
Yeah, it's not the top 10. I found the top 10, and it's not the top 10, but it's in the top 100.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, it's certainly, I mean, if you're a science fiction fan of any sort, certainly an enjoyable thing to watch.
I hesitate to call it homework, but if you're a kaiju fan, you owe it to yourself to watch this. Similarly to what I would say about the original King Kong, because it's so instrumental in the development of this genre, you need to see it.
Well, and I was here for the original King Kong. King Kong is a really good movie. I mean, that's a great movie.
Yeah.
I mean, it just is amazing how well that movie holds up for being that old.
Yeah.
And this doesn't quite have that same sort of like, what? This was made, this feels like it was made in 50. You watch King Kong and like, wait, this is that old? I can't believe it.
Yeah, most definitely. And at least, I'm going to harp on it. At least King Kong let us breathe for a minute before it ended. I'm just saying.
Yeah, the ending is very, like, it's dead. Nothing else to talk about.
It's even a little bit celebratory, which is kind of strange, which was not in the original Godzilla at all. They kill Godzilla in the original movie, and it's a somber movie.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. It is a very somber moment because Dr. Yamane says there could be another one.
Yeah.
If we don't learn our lessons about nuclear weapons, there could be another one. Which again illustrates the major cultural differences. I mean, even the Americanized version of the original movie tries to end on a more positive note, a very American thing to do.
We like happy
endings. But even that is still pretty somber. It just has this little bit of levity thrown in where reporter Steve Martin, a.k.a. Raymond Burr, says, the monster is dead, but so is a great man, but now the world can wake up and live again. Yep. I mean, so it's trying to put a happier spin on it, but it's still maintaining the somberness of it.
Really, I think the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, that and Godzilla, comparing them is a really good way to tackle the movie, I think.
Yeah, which perhaps will be a subject for a future episode. I don't know. I make no promises.
Yes.
But it'll be an interesting one, to say the least. But now it's time to move in to our Toku Topics. Okay, so we're actually going to be tackling a pair of topics here. And I will admit, if I really wanted to, and actually with one of these I kind of did in a previous podcast life, really dive really deep into both of these things. They're both really fascinating histories about two very different things.
Yes.
But they are components, not necessarily essential components. It's got one from the beginning and one from the end. I just realized that.
And the future.
Yeah, I just realized I kind of I picked one thing that gets brought up at the beginning and then gets dropped, and then I get another one that gets brought up at the beginning and then gets brought up at the end and didn't really get mentioned before this. And that is, we're going to talk about briefly history of nuclear tests and amusement parks.
Yeah, amusement parks. Those are fun.
A little history on amusement parks.
Take you on a ride.
That's what Marvel vs. Capcom 2 kept promising me. I'm gonna take you for a ride. I don't understand that soundtrack. It is one of the weirdest soundtracks in any video game. Anyway, no tangents.
Nope, derail trains of thought.
Yes.
You
drop your show there as much as you can. All right. So, nuclear tests. There have been a lot of nuclear tests.
Yeah.
2,212.
So
now, I will admit this number may be out of date now, but that's what I had.
That's through semi-recently.
Yeah, at least semi-recently.
So, like, early on, have they accumulated, or has it been a lot at one time and then they slowed down?
I saw a chart that showed how many there were per year, and there was a giant spike in 1963.
Oh, okay.
Giant. It was huge. That was the most of any year.
Okay, so it's ramping up by this point.
The 50s, there were, because we're primarily going to be talking a lot about stuff that led up to the time of this movie.
Yeah, so
there weren't
50s.
Nearly as many before then, but there's been 2,200, over 2,200 total.
Wow, that's more than I would have guessed.
From 8 different nations since 1945.
Wow.
There is what you could kind of call the nuclear club.
Yep.
The actual nuclear powers, United States, Russia, France, Britain. I can't remember all of the nations offhand right now. Unfortunately, North Korea.
Yeah.
And apparently Israel has some nukes, but they don't really tell anybody.
Well, that sounds...
But though it's like everyone's just kind of like, yeah, they have nukes, they just don't tell us. That sort of a thing.
Yeah.
Like I said, that's a whole rabbit hole.
Yeah.
To
No,
jump
you could
down.
Yeah, you could do a ton of work on that.
So over 2,200, and more than half of them, the number I have here exactly is 1,032 by the U.S. alone.
We did a lot.
And then 727, again, could be out of date, this says the Soviet Union, could be Russia as well.
Yeah.
Nuclear tests have dropped drastically over the last 40 years or so.
Yeah, I would have guessed that.
Yeah. And then the rest of them, I already kind of named some of these countries, but the rest of those tests were conducted by the UK, France, China, India, Pakistan, and
North Korea.
Unfortunately, North Korea.
Yeah.
And then there are some noteworthy tests throughout this history. Most of them actually occur after 1953, which is after this movie. The most important one, I would say, particularly in the kaiju genre, is Castle Bravo, because, and we'll get into it a little bit later, but that's an important one from 1954. Then Tsar Bomba. The biggest Soviet nuclear test from 1961. And then 596, 1964, which was the first Chinese nuclear test. And I just like to point out that all of these big name, famous nuclear tests all sound like band names. Yeah. I'm just saying. All these code names, they sound like band names. I could seriously see, particularly Tsar Bomba.
They should have named one of them Operation Experiment.
Yes. I suddenly want there to be a music festival on the island with all these bands.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, I'd come back for that.
I'll suggest that to the board sometime.
Can I reserve Operation Experiment for
Sure,
my band?
you can have Operation Experiment.
Okay, awesome.
The name of your first album will be X Day.
X Day. Exactly, X Day.
What kind of music does Operation Experiment do? Well, let me guess.
Yes.
Alternative?
EDM.
Because you're experimental. You're an experimental band. All right. So some that are also noteworthy that lead before 1953, the year of this movie, you have RDS-37, which was the first Soviet nuclear test in 1949. Operation Hurricane from Great Britain, 1952.
Does it rock you like a hurricane?
Yes.
Yes.
Again, the song references. The letters are not here, but you're filling that void. I love it. And then these just sound a little bit funny to me. Ivy Mike, which was an American test, and this was the first cryogenic fusion fuel staged thermonuclear weapon in 1952.
Mike sounds like something from like Mike Tyson's Punch-Out.
Yeah, it does.
One guy's, yeah.
Yeah, and then you have Ivy King.
That's his second boss form.
Apparently. Yeah. He leveled up. Which is another American test, the largest pure fusion weapon ever tested in 1952. And then we have Joe 4, which was a Soviet test. I believe, I don't have it here, unfortunately, in my notes. I think that was 1953.
Okay.
And it was their first fusion weapon that they ever tested.
So at that point, they were just keep upgrading and testing them and seeing what's going on. So So it's growing in the 60s is really where the most of the attention is.
Yeah, that's when the Cold War gets ramped up like crazy.
So it's just, we're ramping up here. So that's why right now in our movie, it's sort of just like, yeah, we did it. Yay.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about it earlier. Yeah. It's a concern. It's something that, but
there's an optimism to it.
There's an optimism to it. It still has that very American kind of cavalier attitude to it, which again, nowhere in a Japanese film.
No.
Nowhere in a Japanese film. So the first ever nuclear test was conducted July 16th, 1945 in Jornada del Muerto, which is a desert 35 miles southeast of Socorro, New Mexico, and it was part of the Manhattan Project.
Yep.
It was codenamed Trinity by Oppenheimer, J. Robert Oppenheimer, who's the director of the Los Alamos laboratory where the bombs were developed.
Yep.
And it was inspired, got a lot of literature references coming up this episode, which I guess shouldn't be surprising considering you're the guest, that it was inspired by a line in a John Donne poem.
Oh, wow. I did not know that.
And this test was actually the same model as the Fat Man bomb that got dropped on Nagasaki.
Okay. Well, yeah, it's only only a little bit before.
Yeah.
And then when did they find out about the radiation things? Because obviously, even in this movie, they're like, hey, if you get anything on the Geiger counter, come back.
The dangers of radiation were unknown at the time when those tests were being conducted in 1945.
Well, yeah, at that point, they're just like, I know early on people were like, we may even destroy the atmosphere with this, or, they didn't know.
Absurd things like that.
Yeah.
Like, it would ignite the atmosphere.
They didn't know what was going to happen.
Which makes you wonder how the heck they went. Although I think as the process was going on, I think the scientists were like, you're crazy. That could never happen. So when they conducted this first test, it was conducted in secret. They didn't know all the details about the radiation, so they didn't evacuate anybody. And then the fallout from the blast was detected as far as our home state of Indiana.
Oh,
how
great.
Terrifying is that?
That's kind of nuts.
Yeah. New Mexico, Indiana. Yeah. Yes, I know. You would have been very happy because you lived in New York. Although this was before you were born, I think.
Yeah, I don't.
Your timeline really makes no sense to me. But that's immaterial.
That's neither there or then.
Yes. Wibbly wobbly timey wimey.
Exactly.
So
random sidetrack. So I watched this video one time where it asked what was the fastest moving man-made object ever. And according to this video, at least, it was a manhole above one of these underground nuclear tests that got shot straight into space, basically. Yeah, I'll have to show you that video sometime. It was crazy. From the calculation from the video watching it, they think it was ended up being the fastest man-made object ever.
Listeners, you can't see it because there's no video for this, but I am covering my mouth in shock and my jaw was just hanging open. Wow.
I'll have to show it to you, double check my accuracy before putting that part in, but.
Are you freaking kidding me? You found that manhole in orbit? Seriously? Where is it now? It's that pin you've been wearing?
It's not very big.
Oh,
that makes sense.
It would melt going through the atmosphere.
Okay.
That makes sense. Okay.
Interesting.
You collect very interesting things, apparently.
So if you ever need money here on the island, I guess you can do an auction. Oh, no, I wasn't saying you should. I'm just saying... Okay, never mind. I apologize.
Okay.
Yeah, just thinking. Talking out loud.
Yeah. You do that a lot.
I do.
You're one of the most talkative introverts I know. So anyway, going back to this test, residents in the immediate area were exposed to over 20,000 millirems of radiation, which is 10,000 times the safety limit by the Nuclear Regulatory Commissions.
Yeah, not good.
They were breathing in contaminated air. They were ingesting contaminated rainwater and goat's milk.
Oh.
So we had radioactive goats?
Sure, why not?
That sounds like a terrible movie waiting to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Radioactive Goat. There's another band name for you. We are the Radioactive Goats.
Billy Goat's Giant.
By the 1950s, the U.S. had a dedicated nuclear test sites in Nevada and the Marshall Islands.
Yep.
The Soviets were conducting tests in Kazakhstan. The most infamous test, we already mentioned this a little bit, was Castle Bravo, which was done on the Bikini Atoll. The scientists underestimated the far-reaching effects. This is a very condensed version because we're not talking about Godzilla because this is directly related to Godzilla. Yeah. The scientists underestimated the far-reaching effects, so the crew of a nearby fishing ship, the Lucky Dragon No. 5, were plagued by radiation sickness, with one of them dying, and fish supplies were contaminated, This fallout and that of other tests eventually led to the Partial Ban Treaty in 1962, which limited nuclear tests to underground tests, although it took about 2 decades for countries to actually stop doing atmospheric tests altogether.
So here's a question. And maybe you don't know this, how much was the public aware of these tests back, say, in the 50s? Or was it not well known?
I get the feeling, especially since we see it in this film, that the public was aware of these things, at least in one form or another. The Project Manhattan tests were obviously secret.
Yeah.
So this is something, the impression I'm getting is that this is stuff that is common knowledge that people are aware of, because this film is tapping into that.
That's true. So they must be aware enough that it's like, oh, this is a thing that happens.
And I know with the movie Them, with the giant ants, they actually take it a step further because those are nuclear mutated ants.
Okay.
And the nuclear component in that, for what I understand, I haven't seen Them yet. Don't hate me.
I hate you.
Shut up. Oh, you say that every day. I don't believe you for a second. See what I have to work with?
I know.
Yeah. Anyway, I think the nuclear angle is stronger in that. So there's a little bit more of that nuclear fear, I think, present in that film, which was just a year after this.
Yeah.
I might add. Like I said, it's something that people are aware
So things are in the back. It's in the background. It's becoming part of the cultural
the zeitgeist.
Yeah.
I mean,
use that word.
The Cold War is taking off. So I think you get the tiniest smidgens of it in this movie. The fear of nuclear annihilation. It's not all that strong, but it's at least kind of implicit because, like I said, this was the first atomic monster movie.
Yeah.
So at this point, for all intents and purposes, for the 50s and 60s, radiation is essentially magic. It can do whatever you want. It can thaw out 100 million-year-old dinosaurs. It can mutate another one and make it breathe nuclear fire.
It just
one
does
can
stuff.
make a spider can get too close to a reactor, bite Peter Parker, and he gets superpowers.
Yeah, why not?
It was magic. And then there came a point where that shifted away from radiation to genetics. And then genetics was the magic that you could, that you could do whatever you wanted with it. You could make up all kinds of
So what's our current magic? VR? No, that was like 80s.
No, more of a 90s thing.
90s?
Much more of a 90s
So what is our current?
Probably still kind of genetics at this point,
Multiverse?
Yeah, multiverse. Yeah.
Time travel.
There's a lot of multiversal theory going on around here on the island. Trust me. Trust me about that. I hear about it all the time.
I will in this timeline.
Yes.
My other one, I probably won't.
Maybe not.
Okay.
All right. As fun as talking about the multiverse and string theory and all that would be, I'm sure Jimmy would be excited about this. I mean, he used to work at NASA.
That's true.
So
I heard that.
They love all of that stuff. They eat it up.
Yeah.
You should see all the things that he retweets it from. He follows every space and NASA thing in existence on Twitter. It's kind of nuts. But all that being said, let's move on to a lighter topic.
Yes.
Because you can get really depressing about all of this nuclear stuff.
Yes.
Well, let's move on to something a little more amusing. You're a jerk, Jimmy. Anyway, talk about theme parks.
Yes.
At least briefly. Because
we'll stay on track.
Gee whiz, Jimmy, you're nicer to Nick. Is it because he's the guest? You're just nicer to the guest? I see how this works. Unless it's Joy, right? Do I need to remind you about the beating you took from Daimajin? I'm just saying.
Actually, he emailed our podcast. He loves our pun times.
Of course he does.
So we end in an amusement park.
Yeah.
Which is kind of fun. It kind of different. I mean, it's a different sort of ending. You're like, oh, we're in a roller coaster. Oh, okay, let's do this thing.
Yeah. And the thing is,
they
did film in a real amusement park. It was the Pike, which is over in the Long Beach area of California. Mm-hmm. Now, they passed the Pike off as a different theme park. It's not the Pike because, obviously this is in New York and the Pike is in California. So the thing that's a little bit confusing is a lot of sources, most sources, honestly, including Harryhausen and Bradbury in that little interview we watched, they said it was Coney Island.
Yes.
But I looked at another source, I think it was Wikipedia, that said it was the Palisades Amusement Park, which is on Coney Island. Apparently, Coney Island had multiple theme parks at one point or another.
Okay.
So I'm a little bit confused about that. But like I said, it was filmed at the Pike. We're going to talk a little bit about the Pike specifically because that is where the movie was filmed. And there are other movie connections.
Great movie connections.
Yes.
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 So amusement parks, though, it was interesting. We were saying that the atomic bombs were kind of growing the testing at this point, but amusement parks were kind of declining.
They were on the decline at this point.
By this point. I mean, they're, I guess, pre-World War II, it was kind of their heyday.
Yeah,
Correct.
the Gilded Age.
The Gilded Age.
The Great Gatsby days. See, we got more literary references coming in. So the Great Gatsby
because
days.
people have money, they have time, they have cool automobiles. I don't know that. And they went like, I'm bored. Let's go do something fun. You know what? I'm going to really go crazy. I'm going 10 miles an hour around on a horse. And that would be cool.
The carousel.
Exactly. Like,
carousel.
whoa, what's going on?
Oh my gosh.
And you got the World's Fair going on in lots of places.
Yeah. So there's a lot of elements that went into that. I'm going to run through them here really quick. So theme parks actually come from 3 different traditions. Traveling to fairs.
Yes, which is, like you go to the Renaissance Fair now, just old school stuff.
Pleasure gardens and exhibitions, which we've talked about.
So like pleasure gardens like Babylonian, like the Babylonian gardens?
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like old school. I'll just
Yeah, an exhibit, like, World's Fair, that sort of stuff. The oldest fair, if you're talking about the periodic fairs, like you and I, we grew up in Indiana, and we know all Apple Festival in Kendallville,
or 4-H fair, the 4-H fairs.
4-H fair. Well, I lived near a little place called North Webster, Indiana. They had the Mermaid Festival. The Fort Wayne had Three Rivers Festival.
Or you read things like, I don't know how accurate it is, Sword in the Stone, and they have that whole kind of festival where all the knights go to and stuff.
Yeah. So the oldest festival of that type is the Bartholomew Fair in England, which started in 1133.
That's old.
Yes. Almost as old as Jimmy. Oh, calm down. Like I said, I'm still confused about your timeline.
He looks good for however old he is.
He's apparently 30, but...
Oh, wow.
That's what he says.
He does not look well for his age then. Okay, just joking, Jimmy. Just joking. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, you might want to be nice to him. He may not bring you back next time.
Well, that's true. He saved me.
Yeah,
but we made friends when that first time we skydived.
Yeah, when you skydove out. Yeah,
we FaceTime each other.
Is it
sometimes.
skydove or skydived? I mean, I think it's
skydove.
Yeah. Anyway, back on track. So by the 18th and 19th centuries, they had evolved to the point where the masses could go see freak shows and acrobatics and other entertainment, like the circus.
Yeah,
the Barnum and Bailey.
Exactly. It's like
that sort of stuff. It probably grew out of the same tradition.
Things that we don't see normally.
The world's oldest amusement park, which is an example of a pleasure garden, is the Bakken, or the Hill in Copenhagen, Denmark. And it was opened in 1583.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. The first World's Fair was in 1851 in London and began with the construction of the Crystal Palace.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
Mm-hmm. It was meant to celebrate the world's industrial achievements.
Look how great we have done things.
Yes.
Like the first elevator, I think, was at one of the World Fairs.
Really?
I think so.
That makes sense. The forerunner to the amusement park in America was the first Columbian Exposition in Chicago in 1893. It was here that people got to ride the first steel Ferris wheel.
Which would have been quite a thing. I mean, Ferris wheels is still sort of thing if you don't like heights.
Yeah. But I mean, back then, it would have been this incredible feat of engineering at that point.
Exactly.
Yeah, Jimmy knows all about engineering. Mm-hmm. It was also the first to have a midway.
Okay.
Many amusement parks developed out of pleasure resorts in the 1800s, not unlike the resort we have here.
It's a very nice resort.
We don't have a theme park. That's our competition.
I think you need a theme park. Bring the kids to, little like dinosaurs you can ride, or
a tiny kaiju.
Be eaten by Godzilla. Go through his intestines. It'd be a fun ride. It's like a water slide. And like, wow.
Well, it's funny that you bring that up, because in Japan, on the mainland, they just opened up this little zip line at I don't remember if it's at a theme park or not, but it's on the mainland, like I said, and it's Shin Godzilla lying on his stomach with his mouth wide open, and you zip line into his mouth and go through his neck, and then you come out.
Oh, really?
On the other side. It looks, I've seen video of it, of people recording themselves as they go through it. It looks really fun.
Well,
I really, really want to go. If I ever get some vacation time anytime soon here from the island, you can bet that's where I'm going.
Well, I saw they made a Gundam robot there too.
Yes.
That was supposed to be for a theme park.
Yes. Jimmy was very excited about that because, he works on giant robots.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Does that frighten me?
No.
No? Okay.
I'm all for the giant robots.
Okay.
I'm totally for the giant robots. So, getting back to the theme park. The first permanent amusement park in America was the Sea Lion Park in Coney Island.
Coney Island, New York City.
Which opened in 1895. It was the first to charge admission to enter and then charge more for the rides.
Yep.
That was always fun, right?
Yep. Buy tickets.
Yeah. Steeplechase Park and others opened later. By 1910, as many as 1 million people were admitted to these parks a day.
That's crazy.
That is insane to think about. And, this connects to the movie, right? Because what happens? The roller coaster crashes and starts a fire, and then the roller coaster track burns down. Yeah. And we have this cool visual to go with as as Harryhausen put it, his monster dies like a tenor in an opera. Yes. It's this very dramatic death, and I kept thinking, it's like, where's your soliloquy? You need your soliloquy. But
not as dramatic as Yangri.
Yes. Yangri. Fire was a constant threat in these days, and several Coney Island parks have burned down, most notably Dreamland in 1911 and Luna Park in 1944.
Okay, if my memory serves, so there's a podcast called The Memory Palace that does little historical kind of vignettes. And they have a story about Dreamland, and it's a really good one, and then how at the end it burns down.
Send me a link, and I'll share it
I was saying, it's a really good one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I also need to make sure I listen to it.
Yes.
Amusement parks reached the peak of their popularity. We talked about this a little bit earlier during the Gilded Age because Americans worked fewer hours and they had more disposable income. The first kiddie park, and we've heard reference to talk about kiddie parks all the time, opened in 1925 in San Antonio, Texas.
Nice.
It was during this time the roller coaster was invented as people needed more thrills after World War I. I find it interesting that it's after World War I, suddenly people are like, I need something more harrowing than a carousel.
Yes.
I was like, I just survived a war. I need you to work harder to scare me.
We keep getting in it, and we're like, oh, I'm used to that now. Let's try something better.
Yeah,
faster.
Well, in fact...
More dangerous.
In fact, I have here the first carousel was built by Frederick Savage in 1880 in England. So the carousels aren't fun anymore. They're not exciting anymore.
Kids love them.
Yes.
That's their first time going round and round that fast.
Yes.
So
parks declined during the Depression, as you would expect, and World War II as the affluent population moved to the suburbs and TV became their source of entertainment, which, to kind of bring it full circle again, as much as Ray Bradbury loved movies, when we saw that interview, he loved movies. He apparently was not a fan of television and wrote a story called The Pedestrian that touches on that subject and his kind of disdain for television. And I wonder if this wasn't necessarily in his head, because the story in The Pedestrian is just this guy who takes a walk down the street and a robot police car more or less arrests him for daring to do that when he's supposed to be in his house watching TV and stuff like that. And I wonder if it's a similar sentiment that Ray Bradbury is getting at, because people were preferring to be entertained in their homes. Oh my gosh, we just dealt with quarantine because of COVID, stuff like that. We're dealing with it now.
I think that's some of it. And then just some reading between the lines of having read Fahrenheit 451 recently and some other stuff, I think is also the inanity of some of the TV. He likes a big, either thoughtful or new or, he got he loved some of the old, King Kongs and Lost World and stuff. But I think if it just, because he worked on like The Outer Limits as a TV show, so I think it's just
The Twilight Zone.
Did you do Twilight Zone, or was it?
It was.
Oh, okay. I got mixed up. But anyways.
He did The Outer Limits as well.
Okay.
I think. You can correct me on that if you want, Jimmy.
But in any case, I think it's just that TV became kind of cheap entertainment. Mm-hmm. So, which is interesting. We talk about, the amusement park kind of being like where they go get their thrills, and now we have monster movie where you go get your thrills, and they're both melded together in this.
Yeah,
first one.
they're both escapist entertainment.
Yeah, and they work well together. Are there Japanese ones that end in like a? There's one that ends in one.
Yes.
Right? I know which one is that. Is that the Dream one? No.
The first one that comes to my mind actually is Godzilla Mothra, The Battle for Earth, or just Godzilla versus Mothra from 1992, that literally has a weaponized Ferris wheel in it.
Oh, nice.
Batra grabs a Ferris wheel and crashes it into Godzilla.
Well, the other thing that makes it so great is that it's such a nice set. It's very distinctive. And again, the set for the coaster, I think, worked well.
And then there is also World Children's Land, which was a front for an alien invasion in 1972. I do
remember. Yeah.
There is that one. And they had a Godzilla tower, and it nearly killed the real Godzilla. And yeah, that place got trashed, and I don't think we shed any tears over it.
Why don't you have a World Children's Land here?
A World Children's Land here. You have seriously heard rumors from the board that they might do that. Why am I a little terrified by this? Oh yeah, alien invaders.
Yeah.
Anyway, again, getting derailed and now getting back on track. But
on track.
The Steeplechase Park
closed
in 1964. There are several that are still around.
Yep.
Such as my personal favorite, Cedar Point in Sandusky,
Yep.
Ohio. I spent a lot of time there in my youth. Then you also have stuff that if they weren't made during the heyday of this and were in that very old-fashioned style, they're certainly building on the tradition. So you have Universal Studios, Disneyland, Disney World, Holiday World in Santa Claus, Indiana, which is a family-owned amusement park, and Indiana Beach, which unfortunately has closed. That made me very sad.
Did you ever go to Fun Spot?
I did not.
Oh, I remember. That was a little tiny amusement park up near Albion.
Really?
Yeah, it was just, it had like
How
two
did I
roller
miss
coasters.
That one?
It was in the, I think, I want to say 90s, and they had like Tilt-A-Whirl and like one roller coaster and like a couple other rides. And It was kind of cool.
Makes me sad. And then, another one would be Six Flags.
Yep, Six Flags, yep.
So
Dollywood.
Oh, geez, Dollywood. So, all of that to say, they're still around. I mentioned mine.
Yeah.
What's your favorite amusement park?
Well, I enjoyed the Cedar Point. I like roller coasters. I'm not like a super roller coasters fiend. I have good memories of Kings Island, actually. We went
I have not been to Kings Island.
Couple family vacation. We went on, the Beast.
The Beast.
The Beast.
From 20,000 Fathoms.
Yes. We went on that. I'm at the age now with my kids that would love to go down to Disney World and see. Because I
went there as a kid. I think it would be a very different experience going there as an adult with children.
Yeah, exactly. So, story time. So, we were in California for a Honda convention. My dad owned a Honda dealership, motorcycles. And Honda rented out, after Disneyland closed from like 7 till 10, rented out for just the Honda employees. We just got to ride all the rides. No lines, no nothing. It was cool.
Oh, man.
Only time I've been to Disneyland, but it was cool. Yeah, it was cool.
Well, since I mentioned at the beginning that this film was filmed at the Pike, and interestingly, they had to wait until the theme park was closed to film there, and they were filming those scenes for this climax between 10 p.m. and 3 a.m. You imagine that?
Yeah.
You imagine seeing the film crew come in, you're wrapping up whatever you're doing at the theme park, and suddenly they're coming in and it's like, what are you guys doing? We're making a monster movie. I mean, that must have been really interesting to say the least. So, some facts that I gathered, since, it's not the park, but it's where they filmed it. There's some very interesting, this park has its own interesting history. So these are just a few of the bullet points that I found that I thought were interesting. So it was built by Charles Drake in 1902. It's in Los Angeles, in the Long Beach area. It started as a Greek revival-style bathhouse called The Plunge.
Weird. Okay.
Well, actually, that's how a lot of these start. They start as one thing, and then they keep growing.
Yeah. People come, so you make more attractions, more people come. And
By 1915, a roller coaster called The Jackrabbit. Did he bring ice cream?
Pirates World.
Pirates World, yeah. I was going to say, that's the...
I've never been to Pirates World, but the Ice Cream Bunny has been.
Yes. And listeners, if you don't know what that is, you need to go find Santa Claus and the Ice Cream Bunny on rifftracks.com now. You will thank me later.
Watch the one with Thumbelina, not the one with Jack and the Beanstalk.
Yes. I haven't seen that one yet. I've seen the Thumbelina one.
Thumbelina. Yes. It's painful and wonderful, and I will blot out the sun and other such things.
Yeah, which the Jackrabbit was designed by Frederick Ingersoll and John A. Miller, the latter going on to become one of the premier coaster designers.
Oh, nice.
Mm-hmm. And they also had an attraction called the Wall of Death, which was a cylindrome where motorcycle stuntmen like Reckless Ross Millman would perform.
Nice.
So I guess he was the Evel Knievel of his day. The Jackrabbit was replaced in 1930 by a coaster that's very important for several reasons, called the Cyclone Racer.
Go Cyclone Racer, go Cyclone Racer. Doesn't roll off the tongue.
No, not quite as much. Yeah, it's because it's two syllables in that one. Yeah. Yeah, I took several poetry classes, I should say, while I was in grad school, and I learned about these things.
Yep.
Yeah. Which was in this film. So the roller coaster we saw at the climax, that is the Cyclone Racer. It was designed by Frederick Church with a budget of $140,000. So I'm sitting here thinking $140,000 1930.
Wow. Well,
that would have been millions.
Didn't they say this movie was made on 200,000?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Think about that. That was in 1953.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's insane. It had a reputation for people dying while riding it, which just makes the whole climax that much more ironic because they let some of the train cars go for the roller coaster, and because the beast
of 20,000 fathoms.
It's from, but anyway, he wrecked some of it, so it crashed, and that starts the fire. So it's just, wow, this is almost too meta, you know? And it claimed dozens of lives over its lifespan.
Wow.
I found this funny quotation, well, not funny, but interesting quotation from a columnist named Tim Grobady. Quote, "The Cyclone Racer was specifically designed so that 1 out of every 2,000 people who rode it would surely lose their life."
Wow, that hurts.
Yeah.
It's like being the red shirt.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like a Final Destination. Let's go on this roller coaster.
Oh, no, that is a thing in those movies. At least one of them.
Oh, is that? I've not seen any of them.
I haven't either. I just know it's a thing. Moving on. After Prohibition, bars and tattoo parlors were opened at the Pike.
Okay.
Since there was a Navy base in Long Beach, it was a popular spot for sailors and Marines who wanted to get tattoos.
Okay, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. A game, this is interesting, and particularly if you're a gamer. A game similar to pinball and bingo, I'd love to know how that works, called Light Align. And by the way, when I say light, it's Lite, was located behind the carousel, but it was burned in 1943. Then it got replaced by Loof's Light Align Arcade, which is still in operation.
Loof's Light Align Arcade. I kind of like that. That feels like it should be like the name of a comic strip.
It does sound like a comic strip name, because apparently the only good things worth reading in a newspaper are the comics. The comics, as the movie illustrated.
Not as much anymore. That Far Side doesn't exist.
Yeah, I know. Makes me sad. At its peak in 1954, so just a year after they filmed this movie, it was the 5th largest amusement park in the country.
Wow.
5th largest in America.
That's pretty darn big for that time.
Yeah. And as you hinted at...
Yes, this is the wonderful...
This has...
If you remember nothing else, audience, this is it.
This park has been used in about 24 films. They've also filmed some episodes of television there. One of the articles I looked at said that there were episodes of Charlie's Angels filmed there in the 70s. It was, since it's really close to Hollywood, it was a popular place to go film stuff. There is another infamous monster movie that has both the park and the Cyclone Racer coaster. Do you want to tell us what that is, Nick?
It is the incredibly strange creatures who stopped living and became mixed up zombies. I've heard it's also who died and became mixed up zombies. Which way is it?
The one I have is who stopped living.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
that one actually sounds a little bit funnier, to be honest. Yes.
That
and
movie,
I have seen this.
I have seen it twice.
Was it MST3K? Because that's how I saw it.
That's the only way to even pretend to watch it.
Yes.
It has more dance numbers than any movie should.
Yes.
And no zombies.
Not really.
Well, maybe at the end.
Kinda.
Yeah.
Sorta.
Yeah. So, yes, if you have not seen it, be thankful.
Oh, Jimmy.
Oh, that's like watching the holiday special without riffs. I'm just saying, I watch it without riffs, which I forever regret.
Happy Life Day.
Lumpy. I don't know.
Moving on.
Yes.
But yes.
Please.
But yes, that park and the coaster are in that movie.
A lot.
So now
actually.
if I watch that,
in there way more than it should be. Just
so now if I watch that MST3K episode again, I'm going to be sitting there going like, "Where's the beast?
The beast.
The beast
From 20,000 Fathoms.
when you need him."
Don't put a good movie inside your bad movie.
There you go. Except this one's more like, don't put your good amusement park in your bad movie. Unfortunately, the Pike is no longer with us. It was closed and demolished in 1979. Then a shopping mall was opened there in 2003.
No, all right then.
This is interesting because it was just too iconic. A bridge resembling the Cyclone Racer was built there.
And one person out of every 2,000 falls off of it.
Apparently. You got to keep the reputation
Got to keep
going.
the ratio going.
Yep. A vintage carousel and Ferris wheel have been added since then. It was remodeled in 2014 as the Pike Outlets.
Oh.
So
they got the
there's
history.
still stuff there, but there's a part of me that feels very sad that this amusement park got torn down and replaced by malls.
Yeah, because there's a lot of these old amusement parks are gone now. I mean, you got the big ones that still exist, which you mentioned. Mm-hmm. I think there's a couple of these old amusement parks that are like abandoned, like in weird foresty areas. You can go and like look around. It's all creepy and everything.
Yeah, I was gonna say there was one in Northwestern Indiana. I mentioned growing up near Northwestern Indiana. That little town of maybe like 1,000 people at the most. It's a lake town, had its own little amusement park called Adventureland. And I went there several times as a kid. And I think when I was in high school, somewhere around there, it got shut down.
Yep.
And then it was torn down. And you know what's there now? A strip mall.
Yep.
A tiny strip mall with a post office and a Subway and a pizzeria.
Yeah.
And just like... There used to be cool things there. It
that
makes me
age
sad.
Well, it's the same thing with, it's kind of like what happened with arcades. You know, when I was growing up, they were everywhere. They're not because TV, Switch, Xbox,
Yeah.
So it just...
They're still big in Japan, weirdly enough.
That's nice.
Much bigger in Japan than they are in America at this point.
But I suppose, and again, it has nothing to do with the movie, but maybe a little bit to do with Bradbury. This movement from communal areas of entertainment to personal areas of entertainment has been a big switch over the last 100 years.
You're not wrong.
Yeah.
Bradbury, I don't think necessarily wrote, as far as I know, I could be wrong, didn't write a story along those lines, but I think that sentiment is, you'll find that in his work.
He liked things to be slowed down and personal. He hated the fast cars and all that sort of stuff. So
Yeah.
Which I don't know where this movie fits in his things. I'd like to know what he feels about this movie.
Sounds like he was very happy about it.
Well, I mean, something you wrote, and you love dinosaurs. And see, that's the great thing about, I think, wrap up this movie and amusement parks is that just that simple childish joy of going on a ride, seeing lights, seeing a dinosaur on the big screen. That's really
he even told a story about he went to a place where they had essentially animatronics of dinosaurs, and he said that it only lasts for about 4 minutes, and he would walk backwards through it so he can watch for 10.
So I think that's really the appeal of this movie, is that it was one of those movies that said we're going to make dinosaurs real again, and it worked, especially in the context.
Yeah.
And I think that's what amusement parks were all about. Like, we're going to make you feel like something, that's what I think the appeal of Disney World is. We're going to pretend to take you to this place that doesn't really exist, and you can feel like I can go on the Millennium Falcon,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, or you can have a safe scare on a roller coaster.
Exactly.
You can go 90 miles an hour and
probably
go
die.
Do loop-de-loops and hopefully not be the one in 2000.
Yeah.
And it's a safe thrill.
Yeah. And there's something special in those sort of safe thrills, and if they're just transferred to something else in amusement parks, that's great, but it's sad if we lose those sorts of, I'm getting nostalgic about all sorts of things that used to be but aren't any longer.
I think we all do.
And I think Bradbury was a very nostalgic sort of guy. Mm-hmm. If you ever read Dandelion Wine, I think, man, that hurts, the nostalgic wise, that book.
Yeah, well, that's what nostalgia is. It is a painful but pleasant feeling.
Yeah, and that book encapsulates it. And I suppose, that's what, this movie is for some people.
Oh, I'm sure it is. It definitely is. And I think to a certain extent, it sounds like it's fueled by a little bit of nostalgia.
Yes.
When we saw the interview with Harryhausen and Bradbury, and they talked about growing up and loving dinosaurs and wanting to make stuff like this, and then they finally got to do it. And
Dream fulfilled.
Bradbury even said, we're big boys. Was what we are. And I totally understand that. I feel the same way.
I think that's a good thing, I think, to have that sort of like be able to still deeply enjoy just those unique things.
I mean, look what I get to do, man. I'm working on Monster Island.
I know, this is awesome.
I know.
Even if you have to deal with Jimmy.
Yes, even if I have to put up with Jimmy. All right. Well, this is as good a point as any to transition to a very, very important segment of the show, the Patreon shoutouts. Go show!
Travis Alexander,
Michael Hamilton,
Eli Harris,
Danny Domena,
Chris Cook,
Bex from Redeemed Otaku. I hope that was as fun for you as it was for me.
That was a lot of fun, actually, yes.
At some point, maybe you should check out Ultraman Z. That's where I got this. Nice. And yes, listeners, I want to just give you a quick reminder. You too can get perks like shoutouts on the podcast just like this for as little as $3 a month. So please go to our Patreon, and if you're able, please start pledging to the show. We would really appreciate it. We've got some goals that we're trying to meet that, if we can get enough funding each month to help keep the lights on, so to speak, around here. The board's not giving me all the money that I need, and apparently they're all about, making the extra cash. Let me tell you.
Maybe they're saving up for World Kids World or whatever it's called.
World Children's Land?
Yeah.
Maybe. Might shut down my Patreon if I knew about that. I'm kidding. All right, Nick, got some more housekeeping that we need to take care of here. You'll be interested to know that this is our last full-length episode for the season. Unfortunately, we were supposed to have Godzilla vs. Kong, but Jimmy, you keep saying that I can do an episode, but there's no way. There's just no way. Quit feeding me that BS about there being this special premiere for Godzilla vs. Kong one night only here on the island, because apparently the studio decided to keep that one date for the third release date that they had for the dang thing. I've lost track at this point. I'm sorry. I don't care what the board told you. You are fake news. All right? I'm not buying it. I am just not buying it. You know what? The board can keep threatening to take my invitation away. I'll believe it when I see it. You got that? Whatever at this point, man. But I tell you, if you sneak in another little insert into an episode like you did last time, telling everybody about this, you and I are going to have more words, and they probably won't be family friendly. I'm just saying. Sorry, Nick. Anyway, like I said, last full-length episode of the season. What remains after this will be either minisodes or extended mini-analyses. The next episode is going to be War of the Gargantuas, where I will be joined by Ben Chaffins, writer for Sci-Fi Japan and the author of the recently published book, Discovering Tokusatsu. I interviewed him, actually, a few months ago for the book, right before it was published. That was very nice. And then the episode after that will be Latitude Zero. And that's actually a movie you would probably find a bit amusing, Nick. It has Cesar Romero in it.
Nice.
Playing another really hammy mad scientist.
Hey,
we were talking about hammy mad scientists
yes.
actually earlier today before we watched the movie. So there you go.
Nothing's like Doctor Who from...
Oh, nothing can top Doctor Who. I'm just saying. Nothing can quite top Doctor Who. And now I have to do something that I haven't had the opportunity to do quite as much over the last few months because Joe and Joy Metter don't have anything to plug.
Yes.
But you've got stuff to plug.
I do, and I'm not great at it, but if
it's okay, man. I know shameless self-promotion is not your strong suit as a writer. That's my department.
No. But my partner in crime, Tim Dio, and I have a podcast, Derailed Trains of Thought, and we talk about storytelling for the consumer and the creator. And you can find it on iTunes and Spotify and all those fun places. And we also have the weekly hijack where we just kind of instant react to various TV shows. Right now we're going through a rewatch of Lost.
And you just finished Babylon 5. The entire Babylon 5 franchise.
Everything from the movies, all 5 seasons, Crusade. It was fun. It was a lot of fun to see it all one after another. And we had a newbie, my sister-in-law Brianna, watch it, and she's fun to listen to talk about some of that stuff.
Oh my gosh, she was the best part of
she was quite entertaining.
I listened to all of it. So it was great. So, and I will say I can vouch for Derailed Trains of Thought. You guys have been at that for 10 years.
10 years.
It is actually, I think that might be the first podcast I ever started listening to.
You were on pretty early.
Yeah, I was going to say it's in part because you had me on episode 3 and then I became a regular. And you guys are friends of mine, so I kind of had to.
And we've just been trucking along for the last 10 years, and we still have a lot of things planned, and it should be. We have a good backlog, 112 episodes, I believe.
Yeah. And then
recording.
When you're not podcasting,
you're
also a writer.
I'm also a writer. I suppose I should mention that.
Just like our pal Bradbury.
Yeah. So
and me as well. We both, that's how we met each other, was actually in school for writing.
So I suppose if you want to go check out any of my writings, worksofnick.com, I got like 100 and almost 50 flash fictions and
probably got 5 more ideas from this visit alone.
We got a couple of them. Yes. Which we'll have to see if we can make something out of. But yeah, I very much appreciate being able to come to Monster Island. Wasn't planning on it, but Jimmy interrupted, and I'm like, I'll stay. It's Bradbury.
That sounds like the title of a movie or something.
Jimmy interrupted.
Jimmy interrupted.
Jimmy interrupted. Yet another flash fiction idea.
There you go.
Yes.
Oh, another chapter in your autobiography. Sure. What was it called again? The Warrior in Space, the Jimmy from NASA story. Yeah, I think I remember you bringing that up on Twitter. You have fun with that.
He said I could be a beta reader.
Of course he did. Are you going to invite me to do that? It took you all of that to say maybe. Right. Okay. Well, with all of the shameless self-promoting done, Nick, I think now would be a good time for you to try to figure out how you're going to get back home in Indiana to make a reference that only Indy 500 fans and other Hoosiers will understand. So good luck with that.
Yes. Well, I'm going to see the garage first, and then we'll.
Yeah, that's right.
I'll find some sort of vehicle
get that tour first.
Maybe.
Yeah. So in order to get that tour started as quickly as possible, Jimmy, cue credits. Thank you for listening to the Monster Island Film Vault, a podcast produced and hosted by Nathan Marchand. If you enjoy the show and want to join the discussion, we'd love to hear from you. So email us at feedback@monsterislandfilmvault.com. Your message could be read on a future episode of the show. Our website is monsterislandfilmvault.com. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Monster Island Film Vault, and on Twitter, where our handle is TheMonsterIsla1. You can also follow Jimmy from NASA on Twitter at NASAJimmy. I have fulfilled my contractual obligations. The podcast logo was created by Tyler Souls from TylerDrawsComics.com. Our theme song is Wander on the Offensive, live edit by B33J, Sarax, Juan Madrano, and Nonsensical Lexus, which is a remix of Counterattack, Battle with the Colossus, and The Open Way, Battle with the Colossus by Ko Otani from the video game Shadow of the Colossus. It can be downloaded from ocremix.org. All film and audio clips belong to their respective copyright holders, and no infringement is intended or implied. The show is available on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, YouTube, and other fine podcatchers. Please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts to spread the word about the show. You can also support MIFV on Patreon. The Monster Island Film Vault is a Moonlighting Ninjas media production. Sayonara! The credits just rolled and stuff. I got one other thing I need to do, Nick. I know it's a little bit early, but I actually found out that there was an extra copy of the Golden Apples of the Sun in the Sekizawa library, so happy birthday.
Oh, thank you. That's wonderful. And abrupt ending.